Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about being result oriented. So let's get into it. So the question in question was a reply to a previous statement I made about sort of the whole how I feel about result oriented versus process oriented developers, and I basically made the statement that it's just two different ideologies where it's no different from being a purebred something something in politics versus a purebred something something in politics. It's not an informed decision. It is a idealistic and, in my personal opinion, very stupid, non-irrational position to hold. But that's just how I usually claim things. Like I usually say that the intelligent people, most of the smart people of the world are not extremists. The smart people of the world are usually somewhere in the middle. And so this person replies saying that I agree with your view. It's important to find a balance between being result-oriented and process-oriented. I've noticed on LinkedIn that many people describe themselves as result-oriented or result-driven, but never process-oriented or process-driven. Why is it deemed uncool to have a passion for processes? I'm guessing it's similar to the thing that where we make a difference between rockstar programmers versus code monkeys. Yes, usually that is the case. So, in my personal opinion, the reason why you don't say that you're process oriented or something like that is because that is a byword for being unproductive. Not necessarily, but it is how many people will read into that. It's sort of, how in North America people can almost, they will judge you if you say that you're a Democrat or a liberal versus if you're a Republican or conservative or something like that. You create these labels where, as I usually say, the only people who put that much emphasis on these labels rather than looking at the individual and the person's way of thinking are irrational people who are too dumb to do anything else. That is the reason why you have these sorts of labels. That's why the word feminist has gone from almost being about what it's supposed to be about to being something that even women I know don't really want to be associated with the term any longer because it's been poisoned by all this extremisms and so forth and so forth. And the same thing happens for it's almost the same thing I argue for being result. If result oriented is if that is to be a Republican or something like that, then process oriented is like being the Democrat. And the observation that I've always made is that there is usually a range of two blocks of individuals where one set of on the side of process oriented people, they are the people who are more concerned about the people involved. How does things feel? How do we make progress together? They have a more herd-like mentality when they solve problems, whereas result-oriented people, so forth and so forth, are much more like, as I say, like to call them a pack of wolves, where they go out and hunt. If you don't perform, you get left behind type of mentality. Not always, of course, but they want to get things done. So some people are about the journey, and some people are about the results, usually. And the reality is, at least from what I've seen, is that the average middle manager, product owner, or basically anybody who is not usually a die-hard engineer of some sort, not always the engineers either, they do more talking than produce, usually. And at least in my opinion, the world has more talkers than we have doers. They there are so many people who will talk about a problem and endlessly discuss and basically trying to do whatever they can to hide the fact that they don't have any ability whatsoever to solve the problem. And so the result-oriented people, as I've talked to a few of the people, and I know more than a few of these people who are what they call result-oriented, and they always come back. It always sort of comes back to that same thing. It's almost like talking to an atheist. They have become so frustrated with being put in endless meetings over and over and over with people who only do nothing but talk and like so forth, and from their perspective waste time. And so they have made it their almost an identity to not be that person, to be the person who actually brings in the results. And so what's interesting is that what they're actually saying is that I don't like meetings because meetings are unproductive, and I don't like working with people who only talk. I want to do stuff. I want to make things happen, right? But what's interesting about that is that in of itself, usually it's very rare. I've only ever found a small portion of people who understand that extreme is another lapse in judgment, or it lacks wisdom in of itself. Because what usually happens is that they don't understand that what they usually do is that they go from saying, okay, we have too many meetings, to now we're going to promote autonomous work. And that basically means it's a different way of saying that I am going to try to remove anything or do anything. I'm going to try to do whatever I need without aligning with other groups or anything like that, like autonomous teams and so forth, more than I personally feel that I need. And what you're now doing, instead of having a situation where you can never move anywhere because it takes so much time to align everybody, is that you're simply doing shit without aligning with anybody. And that's sort of now creating another problem, which is that you can't scale your process. Because in a distributed system, when you're a distributed company, it does not matter. As I've said before, you are a person in a network, which means that if your node in the network works really, really well, that doesn't matter to the whole of the company if everybody else is behind. And you can, and I have been in so many meetings with people that I've really had a stern talking to, where we have architect level guys and girls who say, well, everybody else's problem, I can't be responsible for everybody else. And I go, you fucking can. You're the architect. So you going out on your own, doing something isolated for your specific node within this network, and then saying fuck it to everybody else, does not help anybody. We're basically just wasting money on you because you do not possess the capacity to spread your vision to more people than yourself. And if you don't have that capacity, then you are pointless as an architect. Basically, because you can't align. The architecture is about the whole thing. It's not just about your little piece. And the only people who think in that way, as I said, are the people who have gotten to a point where they don't want to care about what everybody else does because it takes too much time, and they feel frustrated at the personal level because they don't care about the whole. They care about results, quick results, personal gratification usually. So in my opinion, the thing that a wise person would do, which is also sort of beyond the average result-oriented person, is to understand that, you know, that need that people have for just talking, more often than not it comes down to two things: lack of standards and incompetent coworkers. And most meetings are a product of uncertainty between people. And once you understand, and once you understand that it's really down to that, then you start to understand that, you know, nobody ever needed a sync meeting for getting on the bus or ordering food in a restaurant or anything like that. And that is why I claim that the need for meetings is a direct result of inefficient adherence to standards and practices, and then there's always the incompetence card you can play. And the problem is that if you don't create confidence in taking action, and that's, as I like to say, is usually beyond result-oriented people, because they're actually not smarter, they just have a different breed of inefficiency. Well, it's not inefficiency because in a sense they can. Short-term, this sort of mindset works, and in the right environment, you see a lot of this mentality in sales, where this sort of mentality is like, this is like the capitalist, the purebred capitalist. This is the sort of person who just says fuck it to all of this inefficiency and go and does their own thing, right? And that works as long as you don't have to scale it. And that's why I tell people that usually these sorts of people, they are just a person who has the need to work as a pack of wolves as opposed to a herd of sheep. They're not so concerned with everybody else. They want to see results, and they would rather work with a smaller group of people who have their same drive or so forth. That's something they can align with, but the results are what matters to them. Whereas the herd of sheep, they're much more about feeling as they're part of the whole thing or so forth and so forth. So what I want you to take away from this is that the reason why there is usually a stigma around being process oriented or things like that is because it's a byword for being ineffective for a lot of people. And the honest to God answer I can give you there is that yes, there are a lot of that. There's a lot of that going on. I would say that in the world, if you think about it just as at large, we have more people who talk, and you prefer to talk than we have people who do things within our companies and so forth and so forth. And I can tell you, I've met quite a few companies, or been in quite a few companies where there are entire departments of people who do nothing. Actually, like they actually could get fired that exact day, and it would not matter much to the organization at large. But the problem is that the result-oriented people, they're also, in my opinion, they're lacking a little bit in wisdom, because they want to also take it to an extreme where they don't actually understand that we can't scale a gigantic corporation on the idea that everybody should just be so competent and not align that you never have to talk to anybody. That's not feasible either. That's where it becomes difficult. But the result-oriented people, they usually don't want to hear that, and that becomes very difficult, because now, as I like to say, you have one group of people who can never get anything done because they're always talking about doing stuff but they're not doing anything, and then you have another group of people who do things without making sure that it can scale, so they create like a bad system or a bad company instead. And as I said, it's really funny to me that being the which is anti-process, is sort of, it almost becomes like a badge that you wear, which just, in my opinion at the very least, it just means that you got tired of having too many meetings and you want to do stuff instead of talk about stuff. And I've always found the same thing to be true. That mindset in the right proportion, like having the right amount of drive and an understanding that you have to align with people, because otherwise you will fail in other areas of your whatever you're doing, right? When it's down to wisdom again. And that's why I tell people, if you make sure that you have good standards that are understandable to everybody, and you make sure that you have competent people that know how to do things properly, you never have a problem. But you can never have this idealistic way of thinking that we're going to solve this with process, or we're just going to focus on producing value, because the only people who talk like that are idiots. Have a great day.